Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode. Today we have Melissa Carson. She is an LPC or a licensed professional counselor, and she focuses more on major event traumas. So if you've got it, she can help you. She's a mom of two kiddos, age 14 and age 12, and she just celebrated her 21st anniversary with her husband. She loves being outdoors, gardening, reading, doing arts and crafts, and has a passion for growth and personal self-development. And that fuels a lot of her sense of fulfillment in the work that she does. So, Melissa, we're so excited that you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the invite.
Yes, I love this. I love being able to connect with other people in all different facets and bring it together on how we can love and serve one another and show you you can heal yourself. So tell me, what made you become a counselor?
Ugh, okay, good question. So of course I have to probably say like my own history. We all go through things and just being able to recognize in my past people that were there, things that I needed, things that I didn't need. But I came into counseling pretty late in life. I went back to school at 37 after working with preschoolers and kindergartners. And one of the things that I noticed in the kindergarten classroom is there's a lot of kids that have a lot of different unregulated behaviors, and teachers don't always have the time and ability to work with that. They're working with behaviors, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking they come from somewhere. So going back to school just gave me a very different avenue to, at least initially, still work with kids, but on a really different level, to connect beyond a behavior to why are we doing the things that we're doing? Where does it come from?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I will tell you this, that was always my thing growing up. Like it was the why? Why?
Yes.
Why do we do this? Who started this? It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen the meme where it's the grandmother and the grandchild or whatever, and they're putting the meatloaf or whatever in the oven.
In the pan, they
Yeah,
chop off the
yeah,
ends.
you chop off the why do we chop off the ends? Oh,
Yes.
because back in the day, back in the gap, it didn't fit.
That's exactly right. But those traditions continue from generation to generation until you and I are raising kids and we're doing it in the way that we know, but that doesn't mean that everything that we're doing is serving a good purpose.
Exactly. Exactly. So tell me more about, and I'm with you on that because a lot of the work that I do, we work with a lot of clients who are high achievers, which comes from a background of either perfectionism, people pleasing,
Yes.
be the strong one,
Guilty.
be the reliable one. And look, me too, all hands on deck. But it's the same background, it's the same pattern. We've all got those trauma wounds attached. And while for some people it may not be where they understand, yes, I went through trauma. Everybody's got trauma. But tell me more so for you, where did you notice the bigger pieces of trauma and how it impacted people almost instantly? Like whenever you're working
Sure.
with somebody and you're talking to them, how do you give us a little bit more of your process and what you do and like how you pinpoint those things?
Sure, sure. When I first got out of school and I started working in a private practice setting, I was working a lot with kids. I love kids. I was really comfortable with kids. So, starting at about age 4 or 5, most therapists who work with kids will start to work with kids because they have language development. So, I'm working with little kiddos that have a hard time, regulating their emotions. They get big, they have tantrums, they're explosive. And as much as you're working with the kids in those instances, those kids don't exist except in the lives of the adults in their world. So you're working with families and just started to notice these parents are bringing themselves into their parenting. And not to say that parents are missing it or just making all these mistakes, but in order for a kiddo to start changing behavior, a parent has to be aware of the behavior and start modifying perhaps some of the things that they're doing. So as I was working with families more, I'm also noticing, oh my gosh, there are a lot of adults just walking in the world with unmet trauma recovery needs that are just out there. Whereas, we've all been through the 2016 floods, but kids that have gone through divorce, loss, miscarriages, sexual assault, neglect in their childhood, these things that we would consider big T traumas, really big, significant events. that have these lasting impressions on individuals, and they show up in our day-to-day lives, whether we know it or not.
Yeah. And you know what? Some of those, let's talk a little bit deeper. Let's go a step further. What are
Okay.
some of those things that show up in their day-to-day life that they may not realize?
Some of it is in patterns of communication. In my past, I grew up in a home with maybe an alcoholic or a family that was, harsh in their treatment. So I learned to keep my needs unmet. It's better for me just to deal with it. Let's not make waves. Don't rock the boat. Don't speak up for yourself. So it may come up in our communication styles. I avoid confrontation, or I don't mind being, the self-sacrifice as long as everybody else is happy. I'm a people pleaser. It might also look like when I get in certain situations, I know a buzzword right now is I'm triggered, but that it really is what happens. You're in a situation that in the present should not have this big reaction, but I have a big reaction. I can't handle when things go a little sideways, or if my kid comes at me with disrespect, it really feels like the end of the world, and I cannot have that. But some of that might be in our past versus what's genuinely happening in the present. So that's trauma. Trauma can show up, or just real big reactions to, physical touch, or I'm stuck in an elevator. What's wrong with an elevator? Maybe it's claustrophobia, but maybe it relates to some other situation where harm or a threat came to me, and this reminds me of that.
Yeah. And it hijacks your nervous system. So,
Yes.
a lot of the work that I do with, a lot of I work with a lot of high achievers and female business owners and business professionals. And believe it or not, that, like we said, that high achieving space, or, got to be perfect, perfectionism, all
Mm,
those things that come into play, it hijacks your nervous system. You've been
right.
operating in the same way for so long, whether you've seen it from somebody in your past, your parents or whatever, you've seen how they operated.
Mm,
Even though you turn around and you say, "Oh, I'm never going to do what they did,"
mm,
you end up becoming part of that because that's the only behavior that was ever modeled, right?
right.
And that goes into attachments. We're going to talk about all those things. I wanted to note here that even when it comes to health, like I'm sure you've seen
Yes.
it too, it
Yes.
impacts your physical health in so many different ways. You've got women who are struggling to lose weight. They're going through PCOS issues, endometriosis, like so much pelvic floor, hip issues. That's
Mm,
the root of it. You're not speaking, you're not in your power.
yes.
You've got people who have got, they don't speak up for themselves. You got people who are
Mm,
struggling with hormonal imbalances and they've got thyroid problems,
right.
or just I constantly get I had somebody one time who was like constantly living with strep throat, and I was like, well, that's also in your gut. So
Oh,
like it
interesting.
impacts your body on so many different levels,
Right.
and just that's incredible. So I want to know a little bit more into your studies when you're working with a client. Like, what are some of the protocol or the practical methods, tools that you go through? Do you go through attachment theory? Tell,
Hmm.
tell us a little bit more about those things so we can better understand what it is. And then also, we'll go through how to get out of it, kind of thing.
Yeah, what's next? So a lot of times when I first start working with, let me say like maybe an older teen or an adult, I'm going to present to them just kind of an analogy, a model of wellness I call the three-legged stool. And if all three of these are, well balanced, we usually feel really fulfilled. We feel that sense of empowerment. And those three, stool legs are our attachments. Those are our relationships. It's our self-care, which is way more than a massage and getting our nails done. And then the last one is what we call valued living. And valued living is just, are you living according to your values? What makes you get out of bed in the morning? Is there something that motivates you? And usually all of us have at least one wobbly leg. So when I hear like, oh my goodness, it seems like all of my relationships are in shambles, like I'm having difficulty working with my kids, my partner and I, like, we just can't seem to get on the same page, he's confrontational, I'm avoidant, even if they're aware of it, it seems really difficult to get out. So once I kind of know which one they identify as like the most wobbly, it gives me an avenue to go down. And inevitably, regardless of where we start, it tends to take us back. It tends to take us back to their past. When did you notice this first? Tell me about your mom. Tell me about your dad. Tell me about your siblings. Tell me about your experiences. Because I think we would really love to believe that we are just a product of our day-to-day life, and I have a job that I like. Why am I not feeling happy and successful and fulfilled? But it's because we have all this past that makes up who we are today. So if we want the today version of ourselves to be our best version, fortunately or unfortunately, we just have to do some digging in the past. One thing that I notice, especially when we're talking about things related to trauma, we really want to be able to change it cognitively. Let's say you're going through self-esteem things, and you keep coming across like, I'm my worst critic. Ugh, I'm such a loser. Why don't I get this right? Beat myself up, perfectionism. First of all, that came from somewhere, right? Like, where did this come from? But secondly, if we could beat ourselves up and it would work, it would have worked by now.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of trauma therapy is finding ways to almost bypass the brain to get to where we tend to store trauma, which typically is in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's somatic. It's, for individuals that have had, violence done to them, when they remember those situations, it's not always like first, second, third, fourth. It's, I remember the smell in a room. I remember I remember the shirt that I was wearing. Like, it's stored in fragments with our senses. And so in order to reprocess, or in order to recover from traumatic experiences, there's a number of different models, and a lot of them don't just go through I think, I saw, I reason, I ration, because we are reasonable, rational people, and that's not always how we recover from trauma.
100%. I'm with you on that. And look, every time I have a client that comes through, because I do trauma healing as well. And every time we have a client that comes through, I'm like, this is not about affirmations. You cannot heal your way with
Mm,
affirmations. Is it always about necessarily like having to relive experiences? No, like it doesn't
right.
have to be. And when we're healing trauma in so many different ways, like you said, it's stored in the body. So we got the
Yeah.
fascia tissue. Your fascia is what, if you think of it like an orange, you got an orange, and then you've got the peel and the layer, so you peel that off and get that white inner webbing.
Holds it all together.
Yeah, it holds it all together. That's what it's doing on the inside of your body, but that's also where we store things, memories, emotions. Like you hear
Mm,
Olaf on Frozen, that's like, water has memories. Well, yeah,
right.
water does have memories. It's just where we in our bodies, it's not just stored in your mind, it's stored
Right.
everywhere else too. It's why whenever there's an experience that happens, your chest gets tight.
Yeah.
You start bracing for impact. You get on the,
Yeah.
like, even after being in a car accident or something, like you're pressing down on the brake a little bit harder, making sure we're stopping. We
Tense.
sliding? No, we're not doing that. Like
Right.
brain's perceiving all these things. So that's where we have to do a lot of the work in the background of it, I guess, in the inside of
Hmm.
your body to be able to heal that, kind of purge it, make it
Right.
melt. So that way we're not
Right.
holding it. I'm curious, you do some EMDR work, right? Like we've talked about some of those things. There's a lot of buzzy things around EMDR right now.
Hmm.
Can we set the tone, set the state? Like, can we talk about that? The things that people don't talk about or don't know about whenever it comes to EMDR and how that's beneficial.
Sure. So I know that whenever I describe EMDR, I'll sometimes preface it with like, hey, this is a treatment option. We have more than one, but it's going to sound different than what you've done before. Because I think the medical model is, we're going to cut you open, we're going to remove the stuff, we're going to sew you back up. And that's not really how emotional work or trauma work works. So EMDR, it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And I think it's got more popular because it shows up in, medical shows. It's like, oh, I saw that on Grey's Anatomy, or I read that in the latest book that I'm reading. And so you hear a little bit about it, but the whole gist of that therapy, and it can come in a lot of different forms. For some individuals, there's a method where it literally is like an eye movement back and forth. For some, it's like kind of vibrating orbs that go back and forth. But the goal is, I've seen light bars, but the goal is where it's using some sort of sensory processing to go from one side of your body to the other. And the basis of it, and it is scientifically proven and based and has become a lot more mainstream now because of its successes with trauma recovery, PTSD, anxiety, depression. uh, it mimics like REM sleep, where at night our body is downloading the day, taking information that's important, filing it away, all of, your bathroom breaks. No, we don't need to store that. Boop. Let's put that in the trash can. We don't have to file that away. But the idea of EMDR is to cognitively zone in on a negative cognition that we have adopted from our past, such as, I'm not good enough. That's probably, in working with women, that's probably the number one. I'm not good enough. And we take that idea and say, all right, let's try to come up with, where did this come from? Some kind of cornerstone memories. And then we work to reprocess it in a way that's really different than just talk therapy. So that's one modality. There's also something called brain spotting. There's also some like real physical body type therapies, like somatic therapy, where you get real in tune with, all right, we're trying to notice, like, where do you feel the tension in your body? Where are you noticing that, kind of visceral response when we talk about that thing that happened to you? And you're genuinely trying to connect the brain, the emotion, and the body to reintegrate those together, because in trauma, we disintegrate, we dissociate, we have splits in those things, which is why a lot of times when you have that triggering reaction, it can feel like, I'm going crazy. Why is my body reacting in this way? I'm okay. But your body's like, nope, we're responding to a threat. And that's what all of the modalities work to do, is just reintegrate.
I love that. And even whenever your brain doesn't remember, so when your
Mhm.
mind forgets, your body remembers.
Your body
And
remembers.
it
It's
always
true.
responds. I did EMDR. So there's people who I know and connect with who have tried EMDR, and let's say they're kind of more on the sides of like it didn't work. I didn't
Hmm.
feel different after, nothing changed. What would you say then for some of those people? And I will say this, I found this more in the women who have had, in some cases, now it's not for everybody, but like those who have had way big traumatic experience that they're blocking and they're pushing out.
That's
What
a
would
good
you say to some of those people?
A couple of thoughts. First, one of the requirements for doing EMDR is that the client is stable. Your day-to-day life cannot be so kind of discombobulated that it feels difficult to go back. I also think the brain is a very good protector of ourselves. And somebody's like, what if you're going to find some repressed memory? And I'm like, I'm not going to find it. Like, this is your life. This is your memory. It's not hypnosis. I've gotten that question too. Like, are you in control? I'm like, I'm not in control. You're in control of your body. You're in control of your experience. But the question is, if I have these things that, like are in the past, like what happens? My thought is, if you're not in a space that feels safe and like you can deal with it, your brain is not going to bring it up. It's
Yeah.
not going to be like, we can work with this at this time. So if somebody's like, hey, didn't work for me, I'd say a couple of things. I'd say, okay, no problem. It may be something you'd be willing to try again in the future. It may be
Mhm.
something that you'd be open to exploring in a different way. Like I said, there's a lot of things out there now. I'm hearing a lot of um, almost like a neurofeedback kind of a new technology. And again, I don't know it well, but I'm always just interested in, there might be something else out there that could be an assist. Um, and at the same time, like, you can always do, talk therapy. You can always do medication to manage until you find the right fit for something. But I would definitely say, don't give up. You're not a lost cause. You're not the one person that it's not going to work for. I would question timing, the actual treatment. And even, I know this, not every therapist is your therapist. I think there's going to be individuals that you really jive with, that you feel seen by, and others that you're like, the shoe fits, but I just don't love it. So it might even be a clinician thing where I would say, again, don't give up. Maybe try somebody else just to see if that's a better fit for you.
So I love that. Even on that note of, and 100% with you. Even when I'm doing, trauma work with a client and we're in a session, it's like you're refusing to let me in.
Yes.
There's that, and that's that protection, and that's okay. And that's what I
Right.
tell people. Like, you're only going to heal what you're ready to heal.
Right.
You're only
Right.
going to talk about what's ready to come up for you. Now, can we sit here and say that because of both of our experiences, we know when we're protecting and when we're kind of like being pulled, you're kind of on that surface level.
Hmm.
And on the note of being with a good therapist, you have somebody, like a lot of my clients are like, I love how loving you are whenever you have to give tough love. And I'm like, I would hope it's never tough. But
Yes.
it might be tough conversations, tough things that we
Yes.
have to discuss, and that's okay. It's just holding that space like, "Sis, it ain't going anywhere. It's here.
Right.
It's me and you."
Right.
And I think sometimes there's that fear of exposure that comes into that, like,
Absolutely.
"Who's seeing me? Who's watching me? What does she think about me? What does my
Are
therapist?"
they judging me?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's that visibility side of things. So let's shift gears for a second. You made a comment as far as maybe it's not the right job. What are some qualities that when somebody's going to connect with a therapist, and there's different kinds, like when do we know that we need a psychiatrist? So let's do this one first. When do we know that we
Okay.
need a psychiatrist versus a therapist? What's the
Okay. So I would say a first go to is keep up with your yearly appointments with just whomever your PCP is, because they're going to catch things that we would consider medical. So if you're like, oh, I'm just in a funk, I'm feeling this brain fog, I'm feeling all of this, get some blood work done. It could be your a vitamin deficiency or just something that is an honest, easy fix. A lot of times, too, your PCP can prescribe things like anxiety meds, depression, if that's a route you want to go. Now, I'm a therapist. I'm a fan of therapy. I don't think therapy is a bad option for anybody because, on one end, it's literally self development, it's growth, it's understanding yourself better, all of that. On the other end, I think it's a really good adjunct treatment with medication because medication might make things more manageable, but we're not coping typically any different. So let's learn some coping skills. Let's unpack some of that stuff in the past as well as move forward to do things differently in the future. So I would say check in with your PCP. Depending on what they say, they may even be able to kind of be like, okay, here we go. But if things feel manageable in the present, I think a therapist can truly help you to know yourself, definitely an objective person to bring yourself to the table. Maybe it's hard to be vulnerable. Okay, let's practice. We always talk about the therapy room as being like a little microcosm of the real world. Can't confront your mom? Bring it to therapy. Confront me. You can't speak your mind? Bring it to therapy. Say it out loud. Let's practice because if we can do it here, we can do it in the real world. I think there are some incredible therapists out there. I think you could probably get along with a lot of them. I think when you get along with the right one because you feel yourself willing to be vulnerable. That willingness, I think, needs to be there. So there has to be something on the other end that seems inviting to that. I always thought it was really interesting. I read an article that was talking about the effectiveness of therapists. The number one thing that they said was why clients felt like their therapist was effective for them. And I thought, oh, maybe they've had education or maybe they know all these different modalities. The number one thing that the clients identified is I felt like they were for me and they wanted my betterment as much, if not more so than I did. That's it. So if you can find yourself sitting in front of somebody that says, I'm going to hold space for whatever you bring, and I want your future as much as you do, that's going to be the right person for you. And I think you know it. And if you don't know it, I think that's not the right fit.
I love that. No, you're absolutely right. And I went through a couple of different therapists and I found one that jived the absolute most with me, like even in all my weird senses. like and connected. But there, even when I was going through testing the waters and like getting connected, and it was like, well, how are you feeling? I don't want to talk about how I'm feeling. I want to fix what's going on here and
Yes.
here and here.
Yes.
I don't want to continue to just sit and feel this way. And
Right.
that's where, the affirmations, again, we can go back to this. They're great. They're wonderful. Definitely teach your kids. I tell my kids all the time, I start up with you are, and they're like, you are loved. I am loved. I am brave. I am confident. I am safe. I am secure. They don't know what they're saying. It's
Right. They're just words. It's
they're-
practice.
it's
Hopefully it'll sink in.
yes. And we've had further conversations in that. What makes you feel safe? Well, I don't really know what it
Yes.
means. Let's talk about it. Let me give you an
Right.
example. There's so many different ways, and how you communicate with somebody today will be different tomorrow based on what they've learned about themselves,
Hmm.
or what they've learned about the world.
Yes.
Communication changes. So when it comes to therapy and all the different modalities and things like that, when somebody's going in and they're feeling that jive and things like that, what can happen in a relationship that could, now we're not going into like, oh, my therapist wasn't fighting for me or anything like that. I guess it's more so, how do you know whenever the relationship and therapy might be kind of getting distant? Maybe we need a new person coming in. Maybe we need a different scope of work. How do you know
Right.
when that comes up?
Okay, that brings me to a couple of thoughts. Number one is if you get into something that is beyond your therapist's scope. I'm very aware. I am not trained in eating disorders. I am not trained in addiction. I'm not trained in some trauma recovery processes that you have to be trained in. I think they would be ineffective if I tried them, even if I had an idea of them. So if somebody said, "Hey, we've been working together for this, but I'm really having this," my first thought is, I want you to be with somebody that's going to give you exactly what you need. And I recognize my limitations. I'm going to look. I don't even know it off the top of my head, but let me find a referral for somebody that maybe you see for a period of time. Maybe you see in place of me. So that might be something. Sometimes if somebody needs a higher level of care, I'm not a hospitalization. Most people I see max of once a week. If you're in a critical space where you need more than that, let me give you some options that are going to give you the help that you need. The other thing is, I think it's important to have a therapist that listens to you. And so if you're finding that maybe you don't feel very listened to, maybe they're sharing a lot of their stories, maybe you're saying, I don't like doing worksheets, and they keep giving you worksheets, maybe that's a sign of, I have gotten all I can out of this relationship to date. I would honestly invite anyone to share your experiences, because a good therapist is going to be so open and desiring of you sharing those things. We're not mind readers either. So if somebody's like, you keep giving me homework and I always feel like a failure when I don't do it, I'm going to be like, let me pull back on the resources. Let's not call it homework. I don't ever want somebody to have anxiety about coming to therapy for anxiety, right? So I think if a combination of those things, if you don't feel like, you're being heard, you're being seen, they're helping. I think it's okay to look for different options. Let me give a good resource. So I'm a clinician in the state of Louisiana. I am only licensed to treat individuals who have physical shoes on the ground in the state of Louisiana. I can do virtual, but not if you're in Oklahoma. There is an online, we call it the therapist white pages, that if you go to the website psychologytoday.com, you can filter for your zip code, for specific situations. Like maybe there is an eating disorder, type it in. Maybe you're looking for a female therapist, maybe you're looking for a couples therapist. You can type in conditions, areas. If somebody was looking for trauma treatment, they could type in EMDR and their zip code, and a list would populate of individuals who would be a good fit for that. Read their bios, see their pictures. I always like to know, who am I going to see? It helps me to know, even before I step foot, are we going to jive? Because I know a little bit about them. So I love that resource as just a starting point of, I'm struggling. I think I want to see somebody. Where do I go now?
I love that. I love that. Would you recommend that somebody who is looking, so you say that you can go filter through with it, which I think is fabulous.
Right.
Um, And I love that for people who are looking for a specific niche,
Yeah.
I want this person who does this, who knows this
Yes.
experience. And I love your honesty. Let me say that because not many most therapists that I had even connected with for just collaborations and things like that, it was, well, yeah, I can do that too. And I'm like,
Mm.
but you're not, you have no background in that. Even when
Right.
I was looking for myself, it's like you don't have background in this,
Right.
and I love that you're being honest here and you're telling people these are the qualities of a therapist that you should be looking for,
Right.
and who
And
you
if
could.
somebody came to me with these big goals of like, hey, like I'm trying to get my life in order, I really want to get an exercise regime and I want to get fit, I'll support the goals. But at the same time, I'm going to be like, I'm not a nutritionist. If you want to talk to somebody, if you need a life coach, if you need somebody to come
Yeah.
alongside you in a different way than I can, let's explore.
Oh, I love that. And you get into those relationships too with your therapist and they become your bestie. And then you're like, I never want to leave you. And it's like at some point the birdie has to fly.
Right,
Keep
right, right.
flying, that's fine too. So I love that. So before we go, thank you so much for your time today. This was
Of
amazing. I
course.
definitely want to bring you back. I want to go deeper into, we'll go deeper into attachment theories.
Yes.
That's the craze right now. Like that's so much around mainstream. Everybody's talking about it, right? Like I know where I am, but
Right.
every relationship is different. You aren't just this one person in this one attachment. You might attach to somebody else. There's a lot of security. That's what we
Right.
create more of. But those will be topics that we can discuss later. So
Sure.
I know you said that you can't work with people outside of Louisiana. Is there an education? Is there something like that, that if somebody listening here is coming from outside of Louisiana and they say, hey, Melissa, I want to be able to connect with you. I know you don't serve here or I can't be in relationship with you. Is there a way that they can connect with you in any shape or form? Not,
Sure.
not in like a professional type setting, but is there a way that they can
Sure.
connect and you can educate?
Absolutely, absolutely. I never mind being a resource and just pointing people in the right direction. I have an email address, I have a website. You can always go and look. You can email, hey, I live in so and so. It's a pretty big network. I would always be like, hey, anybody know somebody out in Nevada or California or wherever? At the same time, think about this. You know, if I want to go to a new restaurant in town, most likely I'm going to ask somebody I know and love and trust. Hey, I'm looking for Mexican. What do you have? I'm going to take a recommendation over somebody I love and trust, more so over somebody that just, posted on social media first. So you can even use your own personal relationships. You would be surprised. I'm so glad the stigma to therapy is reducing. You would be surprised if you brought it up. Hey, would you know somebody that might help me help work with my kid? You would be surprised how many people would be like, yeah, I see somebody, or my neighbor sees somebody and they love this person. Starting one place. I have a fairly full caseload. If somebody were to come to me and say, hey, can you work with me? If I'm full, I'm going to immediately give them two other names of people to be like, check them. If they don't have somebody, they're going to typically give you somebody else, so that at some point along the line, you're going to get connected with somebody that is a good fit for you, hopefully, or at least it starts the process.
I love that. I
Did
love
I answer
that.
the question?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
And if you're open to it, look, we'll provide your email address and
Oh,
things like that. Just so that way people can get connected to you.
sure. I
They
would
can
love that. I have
even,
one other insider resource. It's amazing. It's free. It's something therapists use all the time. There is a website. If you're like, I'm looking for my own personal development, I need something until I can get in with somebody. There's a website, therapistaid.com. It is a huge wealth of resources. It's videos, it's worksheets, it's all kinds of things that you could use. Even search by topic. I have anxiety. It's going to talk about calming strategies, it's going to talk about grounding skills. One of my favorites on there that I use all the time, if somebody comes in and they're like, hey, big things have happened in my past, first thing I'm going to put in their hands are common symptoms of trauma responses. I think it is so validating. Like, why do I avoid going this particular place? How come I never date anybody that happens to work in this field? all of these, I think, can really come to just a little bit more of a sense of understanding when you see black and white. This is not specific to me. This is a common trauma response. So that's one of the ones that I frequently use. Maybe we can even link that one specifically, just
Yeah.
because it's just it's a one page, and you could be like, oh my gosh, that's me. And that might be just the right something that you need to be like, oh, this might be bigger than I can do on my own.
Yeah. No, I love that. We will definitely cite that in there and everything. I am so grateful for your time
Of
today.
course, this was so
And
fun. I love
we're gonna
talking
do
with
this
you.
again. We're gonna do this again. Like this is pinging in so many different ways of what we need to talk about.
Perfect. I'd love to do it.
So thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put all her information, everything that you need in there, resources that we talked about today, and get on at it. If you need anything from
Perfect.
us, you know where to find us. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
watching.